Okay, my friends, it is Friday, November 29th. I'm sorry for the delay. I couldn't get to this sooner, but 2,030 Russian casualties day over day. This is the highest daily number since the beginning of the war, and it's incredible. We'll unpack this in just a moment. 8 tanks, 33 armored fighting vehicles, 34 artillery systems, 86 vehicles and fuel tanks. That's a lot. And 86 cruise missiles. Like that was what happened not over last night, but the previous night there were 86 cruise missiles overnight into the day. So that was a lot. Now 2,030, the highest daily number of Russian personnel losses throughout the entire 1,000+ days of war. Now, here's what I was talking about. Somebody commented on the earlier video that I pointed out and kind of had a chuckle at me about I have my figures and I'll show you their figures and my figures at the same time. Yeah, well, that's how it's going to work here. This is Jay in Kyiv putting this out with the top 10 reported casualties. 2030, 1950, 1770, 1770, 1740, 1710, 1690, 1690, 1690, 1680. Now, if you look at all these numbers, other than one day in May, it's all November, 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 October, November, November, October, October, right? So what's important here is that the reason that I'm going to give you my numbers as well is because my numbers are a little different because I call ties as the same day. So let me pull this over here and show you my numbers. So my numbers are this. So let's go back. 710 was the average daily losses before October. So it's gone up a little bit. 1271 was September, 1354 was the average for October, 1770 was the highest daily average on this particular day, May 2nd was the highest daily. So these were like how I was calculating things, and then I was keeping a track of what the highest is. 2030 is now the highest daily number. 1950, and let me pull this over for comparison. Maybe I can't pull that over. Yeah, 1950. I don't know if I can do that. Okay, at any rate, 1950 is the highest day, second day highest. And then there's a tie for 1770. So here they have 1770 for 4 and 5. That doesn't make any sense to me. It's just a tie. 1770 is a tie. And then when we get down to a three-way tie, 1690 for number 6, October 26th, and November 14th, and November 20th. So as opposed to 1690, 1690, 1690, and that would make the 10th highest as 1680. In the way that I look at it, the 10th highest is 1640 down here, 1650, 1660, 1680. So that's just a different way of looking at the same kind of thing, but it's high. I mean, it's crazy high, and it's higher than it needs to be. Now, yesterday I talked about how Ukraine has lost between 60,000 and 100,000 soldiers killed in action during the full-scale invasion. This was carried in the Kyiv Post, but this is sources from The Economist. So if we look at the actual Economist article, this is how many Ukrainian soldiers have died. This is from The Economist, and if we look at this, they suggest that at least 60,000 to 100,000 Ukrainian soldiers have died so far. Perhaps a further 40,000 or 400,000 are also injured, too injured to fight on. Now, the data from UA Losses website suggests that at least 60,435 soldiers have died. So that's a floor of how many have been killed. It could be upwards of 100,000. We just don't know. This is estimations. Unlike other sources, UA Losses catalogs the names and ages of the dead, making it possible to calculate casualties by age group as a percentage of the male population. So again, 400,000, it's potentially upwards of 400,000, and so we just don't know. But this is the Economist magazine's calculations. Now, if we're going to talk about that, then we need to understand that this is an estimate, and it looks like it's about somewhere along the lines of two Ukrainians losses for every 3 Russians. Now, if it is 60,000, and what they were, if what they were actually doing, because a couple of you put this in the comments, like, "Hey, you just don't understand the statistics." No, I get it. You were kind and said, "Well, you're not from a quantitative discipline." So, if it was 100,000, then an estimated 400,000 would be a 3 times ratio. If it's 60,000, it would be somewhere closer to 200,000 as a ratio. I don't know how the Economist is doing it. I'm just reporting what the Economist put out as the probability. A very conservative figure would be for every 2 Ukrainians lost, there are 3 Russians lost. It could be much better than that. I just don't know, and I'm giving you the data based on what is out there. And if you have something better, show me the something better. I'm happy to look at it. Here are the losses I could identify. This is Andrew Perpetua for the last day, and it looks like it's about 3-1, maybe a little bit better than 3-1 Russian to Ukrainian losses. 3 Russians for every losses for every Ukrainian. That's good. Out of 132 launched Shahi drones, 88 were shot down, 41 suppressed by electronic warfare. A couple of them got through. So Odessa suffered 7 civilian injuries, Kyiv at least 1 overnight in the Russian drone strike. 130 out of 132 drones didn't reach their targets, but they can still do some damage, and the 2 that did reach their targets did some damage. It also looks like Russians were hit by Ukraine. Here it looks like some Russian air defense system just exploded in Crimea, rocket fuel detonation. This is a typical pattern observed after air defense systems are destroyed. So that's what that looks like. And what did they hit? They hit something like this. Today the soldiers destroyed a Russian Podlet K-1 radar complex in temporarily occupied Crimea. Listen to this. The estimated value of the destroyed complex is $5 million for this thing. Yeah, that's a good day. Okay, explosions in Russian-occupied Crimea at this hour. Reportedly, Russian ammunition stockpile, S-400 air defense systems. And then there are other explosions where there was drone attacks at oil depots, and here's one in Rostov. So Russians' Rostov oil depot on fire after Ukrainian drone attack. Ukraine launched drone attacks on the DEADLIEST depot in Rostov Oblast and Tuapse refinery, both in southwestern Russia, sparking fires and explosions. Both sites play crucial roles in Russia's military fuel supply. And so the Rostov Oblast governor claimed that 30 drones were involved in the attack, asserting that they were supposedly destroyed and suppressed in the northwestern part of the region, which is why they're on fire. Certainly. Okay, simultaneously with the Rostov oil strike, another Ukrainian attack targeted the Tuapse area in Russia's Krasnodar Krai. And so that's what you see over in the distance here, and we'll find out more about it later. Now, at that attack site, there could also have been another side benefit, and that is Russian large amphibious ship could have been hit. We don't have details yet, but where this actually hit, it was very close to that, so maybe that was hit as well. We just don't know. We'll know in the future. Okay, let's turn our attention to the battlefield. Russian officials continue to demonstrate that the Kremlin aims to seize more territory in Ukraine than it currently occupies and is unwilling to accept compromises or engage in good faith negotiation no matter who mediates such talks. I think that's a very fair analysis from the ISW. Efforts to occupy territory before Trump's inauguration has Russia's kamikaze meat assault tactics now resulting in absolute record of casualties. And so we just talked about that, and I think that's what's driving it as well. Andrew Perpetua mentioned this, and I thought that's kind of interesting. You constantly see headlines like Ukraine holds back Russians with drones, infantry has it the worst. But those same publications never say things like Russian brigade has over 1,000 missing in action to advance 100 meters, presumed dead. You never seen that sort of thing. But if you look at it from that perspective, that's probably what's going on. Let's look at the ground. In the Kherson region, there were 3 unsuccessful assaults. In Horlovivka, there were 5 attacks. In Bakhmut front, there were 5 attempts. In Lyman direction, 7 attacks. Kupiansk direction, 9 attacks. Kharkiv region, 11 attacks. Vermika direction, 14 attacks. Kharkiv direction, 42. Like, that's where the action is. Kharkiv and Pokrovsk. And Pokrovsk, 50 times, 50 attacks. So that's why the numbers are as high as they are. Now, Crystal Wiki posted this, and I thought this was interesting as well. The equivalent of an entire regiment, more than 1,000 soldiers, including 2 lieutenant colonels, have deserted from a single Russian division. I mean, that's just remarkable. Have deserted from a single Russian division. A huge numbers highlight the normally well-hidden scale of desertions from the Russian army. So they're not at fighting strength like you would think that they are, and they're reducing it every day by the tune of 1,000 to 1,500 to 2,000 yesterday. Okay, Russian agent receives 15 years for missile strike guidance. So this lady here, apparently a middle-aged female spy recruited by Russia's GRU, used social media to coordinate missile strikes while seeking sensitive military information. So she's now going to be rotting behind bars for 15 years. Andrew Perpetua said something I thought was really interesting, and I thought it was worth highlighting. It's commentary, it's not clear facts, but I think something's right about this. I believe that the permission to shoot ATACMS into Russia and a $24 billion aid package for next year both either came from Trump as his own idea or were Biden's idea with Trump's blessing. I'm more inclined to think it's the latter, and Trump was saying, yep, go ahead and do that. It's your administration. You go ahead and do that. And he approves, and he's not getting in the way of it, rather than, because he could be raising a stink right now and saying, how could Biden be doing this long range thing? He's just trying it. And he's not. And that's why I think that there's some legs to that. Okay, the Marshall Plan and Marshall Stalin's plan. Remember rebuilding Europe after World War II? This was the Marshall Plan, and this was Marshall Stalin's plan. And I show you this image only because this is the way that the Soviets and now the Russians tend to think about how they deal with humanity. And it's pretty sad. Yesterday I was talking about how it was Thanksgiving, and I saw this. The Mayflower passengers who arrived in Plymouth on November 11th, 1620 versus the Mayflower passengers who survived to Thanksgiving on 1621. Big difference. Look at all the absent Mayflower passengers, right? Because they died. They died during what was called the starving time. And part of that was that they set up kind of a socialist-like kind of common ground that they were supposed to till. And the following year, they're like, you know what? This isn't working. Everybody has their own plot. If you grow it, you can eat it. And it actually worked. And then there were a lot of comments that people put on here about how, well, you didn't tell the whole story, Professor Gerdes. You should have talked about how the Pilgrims then came and colonized and pillaged the Indians. No. You don't understand your history. The Pilgrims and the Indians got along great for 40 years. The entire generation of the Pilgrims was fine. Now, in Jamestown, they didn't get along very well with the Indians. That's Pocahontas and John Smith. That was a different thing. But the Pilgrims, the religious separatists who came because they wanted their religious liberty, and they wanted it so bad that they were willing to die in the wilderness for it, yeah, they got along pretty well with the Indians. And here's a little bit about that from Mayflower400uk.org. The Pilgrims were able to establish a peace treaty with the Massasoit and the Wampanoag, those are Indian tribes, and they went on to teach them how to hunt, plant crops, and how to get the best of their harvest, saving Pilgrims from starvation. This was not thought to be an easy alliance, though. It was one built on mutual interests. The colonists, who became known as Pilgrims, needed help to survive, and the Wampanoag needed the colonists' help in warding off aggressive rival tribes. So the Indians were fighting with other Indians, and they kind of made a little bit of an alliance with the Pilgrims and helped them survive, and it was an alliance of convenience, and they both benefited from each other's presence. And Thanksgiving was thanks to God for survival for those of them who made it. One account was, our corn did prove well, and God be praised, and it goes on and on about that. Okay, last little bit, some fascinating drone thing. You ever been on the road and a cop pulls out behind you when a speeder goes by? Well, here's drones in Ukraine. Just sitting there, waiting. There it goes. There's the target. Lift up and go get them. Yep. How about that? And finally, this guy, Ukrainian ground drone with a bunch of installed drone jammers. And this guy's just sitting here drinking a cup of tea. He turns it on, and look what falls from the sky. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Look at that again. Look at all the drones falling. It's just incredible to watch. All right. Thank you, my friends. Thank you for the time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.